Under the Sui dynasty, women were relatively limited in their roles both in and out of the household. However, the Sui dynasty was short-lived, so no long-lasting changes occurred regarding women's roles or families. When the Sui Emperor Wen became an emperor, he converted China back to Buddhism, which resulted in more gender equality within religion. This allowed for some women to achieve enlightenment and become nuns. Emperor Wen also re-established Confucian philosophies, which stressed the 5 relationships. Subjects respected their rulers, sons respected their fathers, wives respected their husbands, younger brothers respected their older brothers, and friends respected their friends. For family, this meant that filial piety was strictly enforced, and men were always the heads of the household. Although women were still considered inferior to men, they enjoyed more rights in the Tang Dynasty than in the Sui or the Song. However, marriage and family remained largely dependent on Confucian values and were restricted based on social class. Like the Sui dynasty, the Tang was Confucius with Buddhism as its most popular religion. This resulted in women having lots more rights within their religion, but they were equally oppressed in their home because of the Confucius relationship of husband and wife. Women tended to marry men of the same age, but men had complete control of the marriage and the household. People had to marry within their social classes, but some wealthy women had lovers outside of their marriages. Divorce was also allowed if both husband and wife consented, and women had defenses in place against poor treatment within their marriages. Surviving pottery sculptures tell us that women could participate in recreational activities such as polo. Women were also able to take the civil service exam and become government officials for the first time under the Tang Dynasty. There's also several female generals during the Tang Dynasty. This level of government involvement for women wouldn't be seen again for a few hundred years. The Tang Dynasty had a female empress named Wu Zetian, who's the only female ruler in the history of China. She came from a humble background but moved up through the hierarchy of concubines and eventually became an empress. When the emperor died, Wu found ways to dethrone both of her sons and declared herself emperor. Once in power, she declared herself a divine ruler, organized a system of spies and secret police. Throughout her reign, she successfully reformed public education, agriculture, and the military so that she was able to reopen the Silk Roads. The Song Dynasty reverted back to roles for women like those before the Tang Dynasty. Women lost most of the freedoms they'd had under the Tang rule, and women were much less active politically. However, families were not as social class-based and continue to revolve around Confucian values. The law of marriage having to be within the same social class was abolished at this time. People were free to marry whoever they wanted. Eventually, women's rights deteriorated, especially compared to the superior rights they had in the Tang Dynasty. Foot binding became a symbol of wealth because women who binded were unable to do labor, so they must have had servants. This resulted in many women of high social class being forced to bind their feet from a young age. Overall, while Chinese society has strong continuity with respect to women's statuses and the role of family in society, the introduction of Buddhism into the Sui dynasty brought about a new dynamic for the role of women and family throughout the Tang and Song dynasties as well. The role of women gradually regressed by means of traditional Confucian values back to classical Chinese roles, and Confucianism continued to dictate family roles and daily Chinese life.